Hey guys, today I want to tell you about ancient China concubine story. The grand palaces of ancient China were not just centers of imperial power. They were entire worlds hidden behind towering red walls, worlds filled with whispers, secrets, and lives unseen by the common people. Among the most mysterious of these lives were those of the emperor's concubines. When we hear the word a concubine, most imagine women whose only role was to entertain the emperor at night, yet the truth was far more complex. Concubines lived in a gilded cage, a world of luxury and privilege, but also of fierce rivalries, constant fear, and political intrigue. Their days were filled with rituals, beauty practices, art, and endless competition, because every moment could mean the difference between rising to power or fading into obscurity. Imagine waking up not as an ordinary woman, but as a concubine in the Forbidden City during the Ming or Qing dynasty. The first rays of the sun would filter through silken curtains embroidered with golden dragons. Servants would already be waiting outside your chamber, ready to prepare the morning bath, cosmetics, and breakfast. Yet as you opened your eyes, your first thought would not be about the sweetness of the morning air. It would be about survival. For concubines, survival did not mean fighting battles with weapons. It meant winning favor, maintaining beauty, guarding secrets, and watching every word and gesture. The emperor's affection was the sun that could make a concubine bloom into the highest ranks of the harem. But his neglect was a winter frost that could destroy her in silence. Concubinage in China was not merely about romance. It was a political system. Emperors married empresses to secure alliances with noble families, but concubines were selected for many reasons: beauty, talent, or sometimes simply luck. Many came from poor families, their destinies transformed overnight. A girl who once worked in the fields could suddenly find herself dressed in silken living within the Forbidden City, serving the Son of Heaven himself. But such fortune came with a price. Once inside the palace, she could never return to her old life. She became property of the emperor, and her entire world shrank to the walled enclosures of the inner palace. The golden roofs above her were dazzling, but they also symbolized a cage she could never escape. So what did concubines actually do all day? Their lives followed a rhythm of rituals and duties, but also unspoken games of power. To understand their daily existence, we must walk with them, from the quiet moments of morning grooming to the tense nights of selection, from hours of embroidery and poetry to the endless waiting for the emperor's call. To truly understand the daily life of concubines, we must step back into history and trace how this system evolved. Concubinage in China dates back thousands of years, rooted in Confucian values, imperial politics, and dynastic traditions. In Confucian society, family lineage was everything. The emperor, as the Son of Heaven, needed heirs to continue the dynasty and secure the mandate of heaven. But one wife, even the empress, was rarely enough to guarantee multiple healthy sons. Thus, emperors took many concubines, ensuring a steady line of heirs and strengthening the dynasty's future. Concubines were ranked in a strict hierarchy. At the top stood the Empress Wanghu, China's Lechana, the official wife of the emperor. Beneath her were various ranks: the imperial noble consort, the noble consort, consorts, concubines, and many lesser titles. The Qing dynasty, for example, had an exact system with 8 ranks of consorts. A woman's life inside the palace depended entirely on her rank, and ranks could change. At first glance, the system might look like a paradise for women. Silk gowns, jade jewelry, endless servants, delicious food, and the chance to live among the most powerful people in the empire. But beneath the silk and gold, life was anything but peaceful. Concubines constantly competed for attention, not only for themselves, but for their children. The birth of a son could elevate a woman's rank overnight, while the birth of a daughter might be ignored. Many concubines, especially those of lower rank, would live their entire lives without ever being summoned to the emperor's bed. Their beauty, their youth, their talents, all wasted behind locked palace gates. Yet they still had to live each day according to the strict palace schedule, as if waiting for a chance that might never come. Concubinage was not only a system of desire, but also of politics. Powerful families often sent their daughters into the palace to secure influence. A favored concubine could whisper into the emperor's ear and change the fate of ministers, generals, even entire provinces. Behind the throne, concubines could become invisible rulers, shaping the destiny of the empire. But such power was fragile. The same emperor who adored a concubine today could forget her tomorrow. A jealous rival could destroy her reputation with a single accusation. Even the empress herself, guardian of the harem, could punish concubines for the smallest mistake. Thus, concubines lived in constant tension, always beautiful, always graceful, always cautious, because one misstep could end everything. The life of a concubine began long before the emperor even opened his eyes. The palace itself was a machine of routine, with every person playing their role. For concubines, mornings were both a time of ritual and preparation for the endless uncertainties of the day. A typical morning began at dawn. Eunuchs, who served as attendants in the women's quarters, would bring warm water for washing. Concubines followed elaborate grooming rituals, washing the face with scented water, applying powders made from crushed pearls, and styling hair into complex shapes adorned with hairpins, jade ornaments, or flowers. Beauty was their armor, and every detail mattered. Some concubines had personal maids who specialized in cosmetics. These maids would carefully apply rouge to the cheeks, ink to the eyebrows, and sometimes even a touch of cinnabar on the lip. The most skilled could create looks that emphasized youth, innocence, or elegance, depending on what the concubine wished to project. After grooming came clothing. Each concubine's attire reflected her rank. Higher-ranked consorts wore robes of fine silk with embroidered dragons or phoenixes, while lower-ranked concubines wore simpler gowns. Yet even the simplest dress in the palace would have been more luxurious than what most common women ever touched. Once dressed, concubines often had light meals prepared. Palace cuisine was rich, but women of the harem usually ate modestly. Not because food was scarce, but because maintaining a slender figure was part of their appeal. A typical breakfast might include congee, steamed buns, fresh fruit, and tea. But even as they ate, concubines had to observe palace etiquette. Every movement, how they sat, how they lifted their chopsticks, how they spoke, had to be graceful. Servants were always watching, and one careless gesture could be reported to higher authorities. After breakfast, the concubines awaited the daily roll call of the palace. Eunuchs and officials kept strict records of who resided where, and every day's schedule was logged. Concubines of higher rank might have audiences with the empress or receive orders to attend ceremonies. Lower-ranked ones simply returned to their quarters, left to wait for summons that rarely came. But mornings were not just about routine, they were about hope. Every concubine, whether favored or forgotten, carried the silent wish that today might be the day the emperor called for her. If power in the outer court of the Forbidden City was measured in ranks, decrees, and armies, then power in the inner court was measured in beauty. For the concubines, beauty was not a luxury, it was survival. Their appearance was their weapon, their shield, their currency. Every day was a performance. From the moment a concubine awoke, her first task was to transform herself into the image of elegance. Hours could be spent before the mirror polished bronze while her attendants arranged silks, brushed her hair, and applied powders. Each stroke of the brush was not simply for vanity, it was for strategy. Hairstyles, for instance, carried deep meaning. In the Tang dynasty, tall, elaborate buns decorated with flowers and jade pins symbolized nobility and refinement. In the Qing dynasty, the famous Elang Batouias, a wide wing-like hairpiece decorated with pearls and gemstones, became the signature look of imperial women. A concubine who wore it improperly could be ridiculed, but one who mastered it would be admired as a paragon of taste. Clothing was equally political. Every robe bore symbols of status. dragons for the empress, phoenixes for noble consorts, peonies and lotuses for others. Colors, too, carried rank. Yellow, the color of the emperor, was strictly forbidden for lower-ranked concubines. A woman who wore it without permission risked severe punishment, perhaps even death. But beauty was not only for the emperor. Concubines displayed themselves before one another as well, in subtle contests of fashion and refinement. The silk of one's robe, the grace of one's calligraphy, the elegance of one's jewelry, all became tools in the silent war of influence. To appear plain was to fade into obscurity. To appear too lavish was to provoke jealousy. The balance was delicate. Beyond clothing and ornaments, beauty also meant health. Concubines used countless remedies to preserve their youth. Face masks made of pearl powder and honey were applied nightly. Herbal teas promised to keep the skin fair. Baths were scented with magnolia or chrysanthemum petals. Some even used strange concoctions, ground jade, powdered deer antler, or exotic herbs, believing these could prolong beauty. And yet, beneath all the silk and powders, the concubines knew the truth. Beauty alone could not secure lasting power. For every radiant concubine who captured the emperor's eye, there was another equally beautiful, who was forgotten. What mattered was not only how they looked, but how they played the game. It is often said that emperors ruled China, but within the palace walls, the concubines ruled the emperor. A gentle word whispered in the right moment, a tear shed at the right time, a poem recited with elegance. These could change the course of history. Concubines were not merely companions. They were players in a high-stakes political drama. A favored concubine could bring glory to her family. She could recommend officials, influence imperial decisions, or sway the emperor's mood before an important meeting. For ministers outside the palace, winning the support of a powerful concubine could mean the difference between promotion and disgrace. History is filled with examples. Yang Gaifei, the famous consort of Emperor Xuanzong of the Tang dynasty, was so beloved that her family rose to immense power. Ministers courted her favor, generals bowed to her influence. Yet her prominence also made her a target. During this Lushan rebellion, her enemies blamed her for the empire's troubles, and she was executed despite the emperor's love. Another example is Empress Dowager Cixi, who began her life as a low-ranking concubine of the Xianfeng emperor in the Qing dynasty. Through intelligence and cunning, she maneuvered her way into power after the emperor's death, eventually ruling China for nearly half a century. But most concubines never reached such heights. For every Yang Guffey or Cixi, there were hundreds who remained nameless, their lives consumed by waiting. To them, influence was fleeting. A glance from the emperor, a brief conversation, perhaps a single night in his chambers. If they bore a son, their rank might rise. If not, they would slowly fade into shadows, replaced by younger, fresher faces. The politics of the harem were brutal. Concubines plotted against one another, sometimes subtly, sometimes openly. A rival could be poisoned with spoiled food, or her reputation destroyed with rumors. Eunuchs carried gossip from chamber to chamber, often serving as pawns in these silent wars. Even the empress herself was not immune to jealousy, often clashing with favored concubines who threatened her authority. To survive, concubines had to master the art of invisibility and visibility at the same time. Invisible when it was dangerous to be noticed, visible when it was vital to be remembered. Chapter 6. Art, Music, and Poetry. Education behind the walls, though politics and beauty consumed much of their energy, concubines also lived in a world of art and refinement. Education was not only a means of self-improvement, but also a way to please the emperor. A talented concubine could sing, play the guqin, a 7-string zither, dance gracefully, or compose elegant poetry. These skills were highly prized, for they entertained the emperor and elevated the cultural prestige of the court. In the mornings, when duties were light, many concubines spent hours practicing calligraphy. Brushes of wolf hair dipped in black ink moved gracefully across silk or paper, forming characters that reflected the writer's soul. Others played music, their notes echoing softly through the palace gardens. Some were skilled in embroidery, creating exquisite works of silk art that were offered as gifts to the emperor. Others painted, capturing landscapes and flowers with delicate strokes. These creations were not mere hobbies. They were subtle reminders of a concubine's value, symbols of her refinement and worthiness. Yet behind this refinement lay deep loneliness. For many concubines, the emperor rarely visited. Days turned into weeks, weeks into years as they waited in silence. To fill the emptiness, they poured their feelings into poems, verses of longing, frustration, and fading hope. Some of these poems survive today, offering a haunting glimpse into the inner world of women trapped in luxury. Though within jade walls I wait, the seasons change outside my gate. He forgets my name, yet I remain, a shadow in silk, a flower unseen. These lines, written by an anonymous concubine, capture the silent sorrow of countless women who lived and died within palace walls. If mornings were filled with beauty and afternoons with art, then evenings were often filled with tension. Concubines did not live alone. They lived among dozens, sometimes hundreds of rivals. Life among them was a constant balancing act between rivalry and friendship. Alliances were necessary, for no concubine could survive alone. Younger women often attached themselves to more experienced ones, learning palace etiquette and gaining protection. In return, they offered loyalty and companionship, but alliances could turn into betrayals overnight. A woman who smiled at you today might spread rumors tomorrow. A friend who promised support could abandon you once she gained the emperor's attention. Stories abound of poisoned cups of tea, silken pillows soaked with harmful herbs, or whispers that destroyed reputations. Eunuchs who served as messengers often fueled these conflicts, carrying gossip from one chamber to another in exchange for favors. Still, there were moments of true friendship. Some concubines, especially those who knew they would never be favored, found solace in each other's company. They shared poetry, played music together, or walked in the palace gardens, finding comfort in sisterhood amidst the storm of competition. Yet even in friendship, fear lingered. For in the Forbidden City, every smile hid a secret and every gesture carried risk. Secrets of the emperor's nights if mornings were filled with rituals and afternoons with waiting. Then the nights of the palace were filled with mystery. For the concubines, night was the most important time of all, for it determined who would share the emperor's bed, and with it, his favor, his protection, and perhaps the chance to bear a royal heir. But the process of a selection was not as simple as many imagine. It was a highly organized, ritualized affair. In the Forbidden City, the emperor did not simply wander into whichever chamber he pleased. Instead, eunuchs presented him with a list of concubines eligible for the night. Sometimes he was shown small wooden tablets engraved with their names. Other times he was offered silk scrolls or ivory cards. The emperor would point to a name, and the chosen woman would be summoned. The chosen concubine's attendants would immediately prepare her. She bathed in warm scented water, her body rubbed with jasmine oil or magnolia petals. Her hair was arranged into an elegant style, and she dressed in fresh silk robe. She would then be wrapped in a blanket and carried to the emperor's chambers by eunuchs, for it was considered improper for her feet to touch the ground on the way. Once inside, the blanket was removed, and she lay before the emperor. Sometimes the night was filled with passion, sometimes with mere duty. An emperor who had many concubines might spend little more than an hour with one before moving on. For the woman, however, every moment mattered. Her words, her gestures, even her silence could influence the emperor's impression of her. If she conceived a child, her status could rise dramatically. A son was the greatest prize, for he could one day become emperor. A daughter, though less valued, still brought honor to her mother. But if she failed to conceive, or worse, if she displeased the emperor, she might never be chosen again. Rumors swirled endlessly about what happened in those secret chambers. Some concubines were said to use perfumes laced with aphrodisiac herbs. Others composed poems to whisper in the emperor's ear. A few used their wit, making the emperor laugh with clever words. But just as often, a concubine might spend the night in silence, lying beside the emperor as he drifted into sleep, her heart pounding with hope that he might remember her tomorrow. Yet for many, the emperor's nights were not nights of glory but of waiting. Most concubines never saw the emperor's bed more than once or twice. Some never saw it at all. They lived their lives preparing for a chance that never came, dressing each evening as if tonight might be the night, only to sleep alone in their chambers. And so the palace at night was a place of both dreams and despair, where a single moment could elevate a woman to power or condemn her to a lifetime of obscurity. To understand fully what concubines in ancient China actually did all day, let us follow the imagined routine of one such woman. Not a famous name remembered in history, but an ordinary concubine, one of hundreds who lived within the Forbidden City. We will call her Mei Ling, a young woman of the Mid-Qing dynasty, chosen for her beauty and intelligence. She is not yet favored by the emperor, but she has hope, as every concubine does. Sun midday, beauty, duty, and endless waiting by mid-morning. The palace is alive with quiet activity. Servants sweep the courtyards, eunuchs deliver messages, and concubines prepare for the day's rituals. Mei Ling sits at a low table, her maid grinding ink on a stone slab. She takes up her brush and practices calligraphy, tracing graceful characters onto silk. Today she writes a poem, though she knows no one may ever read it. Behind jade walls I dwell, time drips like rain on stone. The blossoms bloom outside my gate, but I remain alone. After calligraphy, she tends to embroidery. Every stitch must be perfect. Sometimes these works are sent as gifts to the emperor or offered at palace festivals. For Mei Ling, embroidery is not just duty, it is a way to keep her restless thoughts quiet. At noon, she joins other concubines for the midday meal. The hall is silent, filled with dozens of women in silk robes, each eating delicately, each careful not to speak too loudly. Conversation is dangerous, for words can be twisted into weapons. A smile may conceal rivalry. A kind word may hide a trap. The food is exquisite. Duck braised with lotus root, steamed fish with ginger, bowls of rice, plates of fresh peaches. Yet Mei Ling eats sparingly. A slender figure is prized, and overeating could mark her as indulgent or lazy. After the meal, she returns to her chamber. The summer heat presses heavily through the silk screens. She fans herself gently, gazing at the garden outside. Butterflies flutter among peonies. She sighs. Outside these walls, women her age walk freely in markets, visit family, laugh in the streets. She is trapped in gold. In the afternoon, concubines are expected to refine their talents. Some paint, some read poetry aloud, some practice instruments. Mei Ling chooses the guqin. Her slender fingers pluck the strings, filling the chamber with soft notes. The music drifts out into the garden, where eunuchs passing by pause to listen. Music is one of the few ways she can be remembered. Perhaps a servant will speak of her talent. Perhaps the emperor will hear. But even music is shadowed by rivalry. As she plays, another concubine, Lady Hua, a higher-ranked beauty, passes by, pausing with a polite smile. "Your playing is charming," Lady Hua says, her tone sweet but her eyes sharp. "I only wish the emperor could hear it." Mei Ling bows respectfully, hiding her bitterness. Lady Hua knows well that Mei Ling has never been summoned. The words are a dagger wrapped in silk. When Lady Hua leaves, Mei Ling's maid whispers, "She envies you, mistress. Do not let her see you falter." But Mei Ling knows better. Envy in the palace is poison. One careless step, and rumors could spread. That she spoke rudely, that she broke rules, that she harbors arrogance. Every gesture must be measured. Crescent moon evening. The emperor's call as the sun sets, the palace grows tense. Tonight, like every night, eunuchs will present the emperor with the tablets of the concubines. Whose name will he choose? Mei Ling waits in her chamber, her heart racing. She bathes in warm water, her skin rubbed with rose oil. Her maid arranges her hair with delicate pearl peins and dresses her in a pale blue robe embroidered with cranes. She is ready in case her name is called. But the hours pass. Servants rush past her door, carrying blankets, whispering names. She hears footsteps, laughter, the rustle of silk. Somewhere else, another concubine is being carried to the emperor. Her door remains closed. At last, her maid bows her head. "Mistress, it is late. He has chosen another tonight." Mei Ling nods silently, hiding her disappointment. She removes her robe, extinguishes the lanterns, and lies down in the darkness. Tears prick her eyes, but she does not let them fall. Tomorrow, perhaps. Tomorrow he may call for her. Milky Way night. Dreams in the gilded cage as Mei Ling drifts into uneasy sleep. The palace quiets. The palace quiets. The emperor lies with another woman. Servants extinguish lanterns. Silence covers the golden roofs. Mei Ling dreams of walking outside the palace, of rivers and markets, of a life where she is free. In the dream, she is not a concubine, not a shadow waiting to be chosen, but simply a woman laughing under the open sky. When she awakens, the dream is gone. A new day begins exactly like the last. And so her life continues, a cycle of beauty, duty, waiting, and disappointment. For some concubines, this cycle lasted months. For others, decades. Few ever escaped it. Epilogue. The unseen lives of women in silk. So what did concubines in ancient China actually do all day? They awoke in gilded cages, adorned themselves in silks, practiced calligraphy and music, embroidered delicate flowers, whispered poems into the silence, and waited, always waited, for the emperor's call that might never come. They competed in silent wars of beauty and politics. They lived under the gaze of eunuchs, the shadow of the empress, and the constant threat of jealousy. Some rose to power, shaping dynasties. Most faded into history, their names forgotten, their lives recorded only in dry palace registers. And yet, within their cages, they dreamed. They dreamed of love, of freedom, of recognition. Their poems still whisper across centuries. Their music still lingers in the air. Their presence still haunts the silent courtyards of the forbidden city. Concubines were not just ornaments of the emperor. They were women, intelligent, ambitious, fragile, resilient. They played roles in the great drama of Chinese history. Not always visible, but always present. Behind the silk screens and golden walls, their days were filled with rituals and rivalries, with hopes and disappointments, with beauty and sorrow. And though their world is gone, the question remains. When the emperor slept, when the palace silenced, when the concubines were left alone with their thoughts, what did they truly feel? The answer perhaps lies in the poems left behind. I wear silk but feel chains, I smile but ache within. The world calls me favored, yet I am prisoner of the palace. Still, my heart beats, still, I dream. And so the story of concubines is not only about what they did all day, it is about what they longed for all their lives.